right, we'll go ahead and get started here just to be respectful of everyone's times. But welcome to the First Friday Forums. We're hoping that this will be a weekly thing every Friday at noon, where we highlight a different project or initiative happening around Indianapolis. This is all in an effort to show the plans and initiatives that are helping to shape and being stitched together under Plan 2020. So not only are they going to be put on Channel 16, but they'll also be on our website, plan2020.com. And next week we'll be off for the 4th of July, but after that we'll have a presentation on Indy Fast Track, and the week after that we'll be on Renew Indy. But this week we're fortunate enough to be joined by Jen Higginbotham, who's a senior planner with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and she's going to talk about Indy Connect. So, Jen, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. So how many of you have heard about Indy Connect, are aware of it? So a lot of hands in the air. All right, so this is going to be an overview of the program that we're working on right now. So first off, Indy Connect, it's not just a plan or an agency, it's a partnership of agencies. So just to sort of clarify that up front, it has various partners, both public and private. So you can see there on the middle line, CIRTA, the Central Indiana Regional Transportation Authority. They work on transit initiatives or transportation initiatives. They do the Carmel Express bus and things like that for the entire 9-county region. Indigo, they're our primary bus provider and local transit provider in Marion County. And then I work with the MPO, and we do transportation planning for the entire Central Indiana region. On the bottom line there, we have several of the private partners to Indy Connect. The Central Indiana Community Foundation, the Central Indiana Community Partnership, MIBOR, the Metropolitan Indianapolis Board of Realtors, and then of course the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce. All of these groups have come together to try to promote a better and more robust transit system for Central Indiana. So Indy Connect, what is Indy Connect? This is something that was formed several years ago as an idea to enhance transportation options, including transit options in Central Indiana. Since 2010, we have been all over the 9-county region talking to different people, going to public open houses, workshops, talking to people one-on-one, fairs and festivals. This is just a sampling of some of the places we've been talking about Indy Connect. You can see here we've had all sorts of different kinds of venues and different people that we've engaged with. And since that time, when it began in 2010, the plan has evolved. So as time has gone on, we've refined it and we've gotten more and more specific about what we actually want to propose for the Central Indiana region, which has led us to the map that we have today and is in some of the handouts on the back table back here. What are some other things going on in the region? I'm sure a lot of you are aware that Plan 2020 is currently up and running. This is something that we're trying to collaborate with as we go forward with the transit plans to make sure that we have cohesive planning on all angles, land use, transit, transportation, all of these things. We want to work with all of it. Indy Rezone, we've been working very closely with those groups to make sure that like the other one, that we're compatible with the things that are going on, and that the kind of rezoning that's put in place is going to be something that's going to encourage the kind of development and implementation that we need for the transit system. Other places in the region are working on things as well. So Fishers, Indiana is working on a transportation plan right now and a bicycle master plan. These are things that we're staying on top of. More locally, Indigo is currently updating they call it their comprehensive operational analysis. This is their bus plan. It's their plan of action for the next 5 years of how they want to improve the bus system, or if they get additional funding, where should they put that, or are there some changes that need to be made to streamline the system and make it work more efficiently. They've just hired a consultant, Jarrett Walker and Associates. He's kind of a premier voice on transit for actually the nation and somewhat the world. He's done a lot of plans in a lot of places that have gotten a lot of good publicity and have been very efficient for those areas. So we're excited to start working with those groups. There are going to be a lot of involvement in this bus plan update so that we can try to make it as good and compatible for the region as possible. The Downtown Transit Center is something else you probably heard about, but this is going to be a new focus for where the transit lines, the local transit routes are all going to come together in downtown. This is going to help because people will be able to transfer to other lines to get where they need to go all in one area with timed transfers so that they won't have to hang out too long or wait around at bus stops in random places. It'll make their trips a lot easier. It'll make the system a lot more user-friendly and understandable. They're looking at this sort of a little layout down here in the right-hand corner. It's an existing parking lot right now, so it's going to be a great use for that land, and it's going to be right here in the middle of downtown. Something that we're going to have to look at is the routing that we currently have on those Indigo routes, so this also feeds into that bus plan update that I just mentioned. Right now, all of the bus routes use this sort of loop. You can see that big, solid, multicolored line right there in the middle. That's where all the transfers are happening when people bring routes downtown and need to take a different route. It's all going on in that loop. So once we have one spot, which is that red box down there in that picture, where everybody's going to be transferring, then we have to start looking at these long-term changes to the routes and how might that function differently in the downtown area. So that's something else we're going to be looking at in the near future. As far as the Downtown Transit Center is concerned, it is going to be breaking ground this fall, fall of 2014, and then it will be opening in fall of 2015. So that's exciting that it's moving along and it's on the way. You're going to see it very soon. These are just a couple of images that have been produced to help people visualize what that's going to look like once it's built on that downtown site. So let's get back to the Indy Connect plan. What is in the Indy Connect plan? We're looking at doubling the local bus service, express buses between counties, and 5 rapid transit lines. So when we talk about doubling the local bus service, we're talking about more crosstown routes. Right now we have a radial system for our transit system where a lot of people have to go downtown to transfer, and there aren't a lot of crosstowns for people to be able to have shorter trips and get between areas without going downtown first. So more crosstown routes, more frequent service. We're hoping for at least every 15 minutes for all transit service in the region. That would be kind of our goal, is to make that frequent service. Longer hours of service, so that if you have a late shift or something like that, you're not inconvenienced, and better weekend schedules. And also expanding some of this service into the surrounding counties where we maybe have a lot of employment areas that people need to get to and from jobs between counties. Express buses and community circulators, these are things that would go point to point, sort of all kind of radiating from downtown is the idea right now, but we haven't actually studied these yet. The idea would be that they would go directly to certain employment areas or certain areas of dense residential development or things like that, so that it would be a very, that's why we call it express bus. It would be a very quick sort of a service, kind of like what CERTA is operating right now with the Carmel Express route and the Fisher Express routes. And now we're going to talk more about the 5 rapid transit lines. So we are looking at 5. We have the red line, which is north-south, Carmel to Greenwood through downtown Indianapolis. We have the purple line, which is maybe a 38th Street route. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on in the presentation. The blue line, which is an east-west route using Washington Street. The green line, which would go from downtown and would connect Fishers and Noblesville in Hamilton County. And the orange line, which would be sort of a parallel north-south route, adding to the usefulness of the red line, possibly over in the Keystone Avenue area. So how are we going to pay for the system? This is a very common question we get from a lot of people, and so I want to throw this slide up there because it talks about the legislation. So as we've studied all these routes and as we've been going forward with all of our plans, it's the main idea for how to fund some of those improvements and how to actually build this system would be enabling a local income tax, which you can see in this third bullet right here, would be somewhere between 1/10 of 1% and 2/10 of 1%, which would contribute to that region-wide. It would be a dedicated funding tax just for transit funding. So that way it wouldn't be able to slide to other funds. It would be just for implementing this transit plan. Legislation was just signed this past March. It would enable referenda in each county to be able to opt into this tax and therefore receive this service and capital improvements. If adjacent townships, if a county decides not to hold a referendum, like for example Hamilton County decides not to, then the adjacent townships to Marion County could hold that referenda and be able to connect into the system that way. It prohibits using the tax that I just spoke of, that income tax, for light rail, so that's something that's in the legislation right now. It doesn't mean you can't build light rail, it just means you can't use the tax to fund that light rail. And the operating costs would be, at least 25% of the operating costs would be from fares that you would pay for every trip that you take, and 10% would be funded by some other source besides the transit tax. So knowing that we don't actually have this funding yet, why are we studying the transit routes now? And the reason is because once we do have this in place, we want to be ready to start building the system as soon as possible. We don't want to have to wait around for another 5 or 8 years so that we can go through this whole planning process that we're doing right now. We want to be ready so that when that happens, we can just get right on out there, do our construction drawings, and just start building it. So when are we going to build it is the other big question we usually get. This is kind of confusing. I'm going to walk you through it, but it sort of shows where each line is at in the progress of the planning studies. And so over on the left, we have what we call a small starts grant. So there are 2 grant funding categories in addition. So the local tax that I talked about, that would be our local match for federal funding that we would be trying to get to actually build these routes. So over on the left is a small starts grant, and over on the right is a new starts grant. And the reason we want to point this out is because the purple, blue, and red lines, which we're studying right now, all fall into that small starts category, but the green line falls into this new starts category. And the reason that's important is because they have different processes, which means that the green line has different steps that it has to go through to be implemented, which means it'll probably take longer to actually build the green line than these other lines, just by way of the categories that they fall into. So for the blue and red line, we've already completed the alternatives analysis, which is that first line up there, that first row on the chart. For the purple line, we're currently in the alternatives analysis. So the next step for the blue and red line will be an environmental analysis. And so we're working through the process. This is just to give you an update, but we're looking at, it's going to take a few more years. We're going to have to get through these studies. We're also going to have to get the tax in place to be able to go forward. So now let's talk more specifically about the red, blue, and green line, and the purple line and the orange line. So the 5 rapid transit lines. The objective when we're doing a study for these rapid transit lines is to look at and determine what vehicles will operate on the rapid transit line, what alignment is it actually going to take, which streets is it going to use, where are the stations going to be located, and what kind of amenities will those have, what will the running way look like and the operations. So that's going to be, is it going to have dedicated lanes, or is it going to run with the rest of traffic, or is it a train that needs its own rail corridor, or what? And then also looking at where is it going to go and where is it going to end. So vehicles. For the red, blue, and green line, since I said before in that very complicated chart that I put up there, we've already determined what vehicles would be used for the red and the blue line, and those would be bus rapid transit. So this is a technology that is very similar to a rail technology in that it has a larger vehicle which seats more people, but it's also very versatile. And so whether you have a train or this sort of bus rapid transit technology, you're going to be having the same kind of stations and the same kind of experience. The rider is going to have the same sort of experience whether they use one or the other. So a bus rapid transit is actually a technology that was created to emulate a rail technology. So that's why it feels very similar. And I'll get more into stations in just a second. For the green line is actually proposed to use an old abandoned rail corridor, and so therefore it has a better opportunity to use rail as the vehicle because it's already was a rail corridor, but it also has an opportunity to be bus rapid transit, which would give it a little bit more flexibility than a rail corridor might have. And so for the green line, we have not yet determined whether that would be light rail or bus rapid transit. And right now where we're at in the study is that we're going to be asking the public for their feedback on that so that we can try to make that determination based on what people really want to see and whether they really would have a preference one over the other. So stations, this is what I was just mentioning. Whether you have a bus rapid transit or some sort of a rail vehicle, you're going to have the exact same station experience. You're going to have a raised platform so that you don't have to take any steps to get on and off the vehicle. It's right on and right off. You're going to have multiple doors so that you don't have to wait on people to come out or use only one door to pay the driver or something like that, because you're going to have a kiosk at the station where you buy your ticket before you actually get on the vehicle. So the experience would go, you would show up at the station, you would buy your ticket at the kiosk, then when the vehicle comes, all the doors open and people just get off and people get on and the doors shut and you leave. You don't have to worry about paying a driver or doing anything else. If you've got crutches or a stroller or a wheelchair, it's going to be handicapped accessible so that you won't have to spend a lot of time getting on and off the vehicle. You'll be able to get right on and right off in a very easy way. There would be real-time information so that you would know exactly how long you're going to be waiting before the next vehicle comes. And there would be some amenities. So we're looking into things like, should the stations have heat? Should they be a little more enclosed? Should they have, what kind of lighting should they have? We definitely want lighting for safety and things like that. Trash facilities, bike racks. There's a lot of different things that we're looking at for station amenities. We have created a couple of just diagrams for what they might look like, just so that we know what we're moving forward with. This is a little very simple diagram that we put together just to show what sort of amenities might be located at a station, and the fact that it would have that level boarding, that raised, it would be a higher than normal curb, so that the bus or the rail vehicle could pull up and you would get on and off. This is a rendering that we created for one of the bus rapid transit lines, so that people could better visualize what it might actually look like if they were at one of these stations. It won't necessarily look like this, but it's a rendering that we put together based on a lot of other systems and what they've been putting in place so that people could get a better idea. So how do we pick where those stations go? Well, we're doing a study right now, and we've already gotten through a couple of phases of it, but it's called our Transit-Oriented Development Strategic Plan. So that's the TOD, it stands for Transit-Oriented Development. The idea behind this is that you want to have special regulations or special guidelines in place for areas around stations so that they will develop in a way that's going to be successful. We see a lot of demand for development in areas when stations go in, and so we want to make sure that we have the sort of guidelines and regulations in place to enable that sort of development. So we're working on a strategic plan not only for these guidelines, but also to help us identify what sort of strength each node has. So we've evaluated many more nodes than we've actually selected for station locations. And you can see this matrix with all these little dots up here. We're looking at, over on the left, you see TOD readiness. That's based on infrastructure. It's based on how many intersections you have per square mile, which makes it easier for people to connect back and forth. We're looking at the condition of those infrastructure elements, whether you have sidewalks, things like that. So that's the TOD readiness. Does that node have the sort of infrastructure necessary to go ahead and start building a station for the bus rapid for the rapid transit line? And then depending on that score, it goes up or down. And then on that bottom line, we're looking at market strength. So what kind of market is there at each node to tell me whether or not it's going to be strong for transit-oriented development? Putting a new rapid transit station in an area that currently maybe doesn't have any business or enough people to maybe support that new business isn't necessarily going to be as successful as putting it in a place that's maybe already seeing some of that investment or is already strong. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at when we pick where the stations will go. We've already looked at, as you can see on the underlying map, the red and the blue line, and how we call it the heat map, how those stations kind of score against each other. We're going to be adding the green line and the purple line over the next few months so that we can sort of round that out and have a better idea of where all those stations should go. So routes and operations. Now I'm going to break it down line by line just so you can get a better idea of each line. For the blue line, we're talking about it operating on Washington Street. The really interesting thing about this slide, I think, is that yellow line underneath, you can see all those little yellow tick marks running underneath that big solid blue line. Those are the current Indigo Route 8 station or stops. So anywhere that Indigo has a sign where the Route 8 will stop and pick up or drop someone off, that's where those little yellow tick marks are. For the blue line on top, that's where we're proposing to have the stations for the Blue Line Rapid Transit Corridor. And you can see how many fewer white dots there are than the yellow tick marks. And that really helps speed up the system, because you may have to walk a little bit further to actually catch the bus when it comes by, but you're going to get where you're going a lot faster because it's not going to be stopping at as many locations. It's going to be able to move with the rest of traffic. So when we're talking about how it's going to look or how it's going to operate on street, we had some challenges with the blue line. The challenges are that Washington Street is a very historic corridor and has been built up over time. And when we look at the existing curb-to-curb width of where the pavement's at and where the lanes are painted and things like that, we can't actually expand that. There are a lot of historic buildings that line that corridor, and so you would be taking down historic buildings in order to actually add width to the corridor. And with the current width of that pavement that we're operating on, we would not be able to put in a dedicated lane for that bus service without seriously impacting traffic, not just on Washington Street, but on all of the adjacent streets and things like that. So we're looking at, we call it curbside mixed traffic. This is where we would put in those stations. And you can see them in that picture right there, right in front of that little blue bus up at the top. where people would be able to board and exit the vehicles, but we would continue to operate Washington Street as it operates today. The other option we have, and that's the little picture on the bottom, is to put in a median treatment all down Washington Street, which would limit left turns, which would mean that only at certain intersections you would actually be able to turn left. But this would really help improve the operation in the corridor, because the lanes are so narrow right now that you see a lot of accidents with Indigo buses, just side swipes, not serious accidents, but just they would need a little bit more room to be able to operate at the kind of level of efficiency we want this bus rapid transit to operate at. So that's something that we're looking into, is that median treatment as an option. This circle, what this pie chart is telling us, is that for the Washington Street corridor and the Route 8, so right now looking at how the Route 8 operates, which is actually a parallel route to the blue line. It goes all the way from the Meijer over in Cumberland on the east side to the airport on the west side. 20% of the time that the Route 8 spends is just dwelling at stations. So that's something that we can improve just by having that quicker station, that, you know, all those doors opening up and paying at the station instead of paying the driver. We can reduce that 20% pretty easily with the kind of operations that I was talking about for the stations. The other thing is intersection delay. That's the red piece of the pie chart, that 16%. And those are things that we can address with they call it intelligent transportation systems. It would be using signals from the bus. You would equip the bus with a technology that would be able to talk to the traffic signals, and therefore if the bus is moving and the light is just about to turn red, it can hold the green for just a little bit longer so that the bus can get through the green light right before it turns red. Or vice versa, it may, if absolutely necessary, shorten a red light by just a little bit if the signal knows that the bus is coming, so that the bus can get through that green light a little bit earlier. So those are things that will have to be worked out. They're very techy, but it's something that is used on a lot of other systems, and it's something that we can use in Indianapolis to try to speed up the operation of these rapid transit routes. So the next thing for the blue line is the operating plan. We are looking at improving the frequency. So not just are we reducing the number of stops to actually speed up time between stops, but we're looking at improving the frequency of the vehicles to 10-minute service during peak hours. These are the rush hours. 15 minutes during off-peak during the daytime, so you would have 15 minutes all day, and then 30 minutes during the really early hours and the late evening hours. Right now on the Route 8, you're seeing during especially those really early hours and those late evening hours, you're seeing 60-minute service. So you have to wait an hour between every bus. So this would really improve the frequency. And then on weekdays and weekends, you're seeing a lot more hours. You're seeing 19 hours a day on weekends or weekdays, and 14 to 18 hours on weekends. So it's improving not just the frequency of the buses, but the number of hours per day that the buses are actually on the street operating. So we are looking at Washington Street, as I said, and now I was going to tell you about some phasing proposals that we have. So the blue line would start at Cumberland Meijer, but if we were to break this into a phase 1 and a phase 2, we're looking at the first phase, building it between Cumberland and Tibbs Avenue. This is where we have a lot of development going on at Tibbs Avenue. It's where the Central State facility was. There's a lot of new improvements happening on that site. So that would be the first phase for that blue line operation, and then we would expand it to get you all the way to the Indianapolis airport corridor, or to the Indianapolis airport. So what are the benefits of the blue line? We're looking at 20 to 25% faster service over what riders are currently experiencing, reducing wait times by having higher frequencies, improving the vehicles, the shelters, the amenities. This improves the experience for all users, and also improving transit ridership potentially by up to 50 to 65%. So this would be additional riders using the system that aren't using it now. And then economic development stimulus for Washington Street by having that bus rapid transit corridor established. So now we'll move on to the red rapid transit line. This is the one between Carmel and Greenwood going through downtown Indianapolis. We do have an alignment determined. We did, as I said, our alternatives analysis last year. And so we got to a recommendation, but we do have a couple of things remaining where we are continuing to do some studies to really drill that down into one recommended alignment. So we're looking at between 16th and 38th Street for the red line corridor. We're looking at whether it would use the Meridian Street corridor or Illinois and Capitol Streets as a one-way pair. We just did a study earlier this spring to determine that Meridian Street is a viable alternative, and it would be something that we could have dedicated lanes on. But we're continuing to look at maybe the economic benefits of using Meridian versus Capital in Illinois to determine which ones to actually select. And of course, talking to stakeholders along those corridors to get their feedback. The other little circle up there on the top is getting to Fountain Square from downtown. So we have a couple of different options on how we would actually reach that. So we're still investigating that a little bit. And recently we had some interest from Westfield to actually extend the red line beyond Carmel further north into Westfield. So that's something we're going to be looking at this fall, is the potential for that and what alignment it might take, where the stations be located, things like that. So we will expand the red line just a little bit further north to get up to Westfield. So dedicated lanes, so different from the blue line, we do have some areas along the red line where we would be able to put in some dedicated facilities. So we're looking at downtown on Capitol in Illinois all the way up to either 16th Street or up to Fall Creek, depending on how we run that corridor. Meridian Street, we would be able to have to get dedicated facilities between 16th Street and 34th Street. That would be lanes that only the bus rapid transit would be able to operate in. That improves our efficiency and our speed and things like that. So we're looking at those dedicated lanes. On College Avenue, north of 38th Street, between the State Fairgrounds and Broad Ripple, we're also looking at having those dedicated facilities. And then also there's a segment in Carmel we're going to look at. And so as we expand the red line north into Westfield, we'll be able to look for additional opportunities to have those dedicated facilities. But there are some segments where we would have that kind of facility operation on the red line. We would be having 10-minute peak service on the red line during weekdays, so we would have a bus coming every 10 minutes and a bus coming every 15 minutes for all of the off-peak hours. So during weekdays, you're going to see a red line vehicle every 10 or 15 minutes depending on time of day, and for 20 hours per day. Saturdays and Sundays, you're looking at 20-minute service during the daytime and 30-minute service during the nighttime, so you're going to have a bus coming every 20 minutes during the day, every 30 minutes at night, and then also expanding hours along that. One big difference between the red line and the blue line is the blue line is currently, would be eventually replacing maybe the Route 8 that's currently operating on Washington Street. The red line does not have a corridor that goes all the way from Carmel to Greenwood right now, so it wouldn't necessarily be replacing a corridor. This would be somewhat new service that you would be seeing upon the implementation of the red line. So the green line, as I said, we're still looking at two different vehicles. It's either going to be bus rapid transit or light rail. There are different pros and cons to each one, so we're still working through that. We have eliminated commuter rail. It's not going to be like a big locomotive running through the neighborhoods. That's not going to happen. So it would be one of these smaller, quieter, sort of vehicles, these light rail vehicles, if we use a rail vehicle. We've identified several of the stations downtown. Let's see, I think it's something like 14 stations north of downtown, where the vehicle would stop. And so we've been reaching out to all those neighborhoods and having a lot of public input and feedback, and looking at actually what would be going on at each stop. We'd be, through the Transit-Oriented Development Strategic Plan, encouraging sort of development around those stations. We're looking at it in a lot more detail. So downtown, we have some alternatives on the Green Line that we're also still working through. We're looking at Massachusetts Avenue. This is maybe one of our more challenging options for downtown service because it's a narrow corridor. It's only 2-lane. It has 90-degree parking all up and down the corridor. And so we're looking at, if we do use the Massachusetts Avenue corridor, it's going to significantly change how Massachusetts Avenue looks today, but it is something that we're still evaluating. And then we also have the Fort Wayne alternative. So that's using 10th Street and then coming down Fort Wayne and using Pennsylvania possibly to come all the way down to the transit center. And so one big goal for using these alternatives downtown is we absolutely want to access the transit center. I mentioned that before, that the Indigo Transit Center would be opening in fall of 2015, and we want to make sure that these rapid corridors can also interface with that transit center so that people using the local routes or the rapid routes can transfer between those and can all operate. It's all one big system. My laptop's freezing up on me for just a second. All right, and so we have a second opportunity for Fort Wayne as well, which is very similar to the one I just mentioned. For the Purple Line, this is one that we're just getting started studying. I mentioned that we have all these corridors, and just to put it in context, I put this map up here, and the Purple Line would be sort of this east-west corridor, sort of right there in the middle of the map. Right now we have the Route 38 and 39. Those are both using 38th Street, and so we're looking at that corridor specifically. But we're also looking at some other comparative alternatives as well. So right now in this area we have the 38, the 39, the Route 30 is on 30th Street, and it is actually one of our true crosstown routes because it goes east and west and it connects people, and you have to transfer maybe to follow that on south. So using these routes, we've created our list of study alternatives for the Purple Line, and right now we're going through the process of filtering those down into one selected recommended alternative. Something that's going to be a big question that we try to answer is, should the Purple Line operate as a crosstown route? Should it be something that literally goes back and forth as this rapid transit corridor that would have at least 15-minute service? Should it just go straight east and west, and then you would transfer probably to the Red Line if you're going to downtown, which would also have this frequent 10 to 15-minute service? Or should it continue to operate like the 38 and the 39 do now? Is that a better model, is to go ahead and run each direction and then connect both directly to downtown using this same corridor that the Red Line would be using? So that's something that we're going to be working through. And then running way options. This picture right here is a specific segment of 38th Street, close to Meridian Street. But there are different places on 38th Street and 30th Street that are maybe a lot more narrow than this. They don't have as many lanes, they don't have a median, they don't have all these sidewalks established. So what are the opportunities there? Is there an opportunity to actually run this sort of dedicated transit way? Like I mentioned, for some of the sections of the Red Line, you can see the picture down there on the right would be, dedicating these lanes just for the bus or for the rapid transit vehicle. Or is it something that maybe would run only during peak hours, and then the rest of the time everybody else could continue to use those lanes however they need to? So those are questions that we're going to be working through. We have had some public meetings. We had some public meetings last month. We had 3 different ones, one on the east side, one in the middle, one on the west side, to engage some of the people that live in the areas and get them asking questions about the Purple Line and get their feedback. So that concludes my introductory overview of the Rapid Transit, the Indy Connect plan, all of the Rapid Transit corridor studies that we're doing right now. But I just want to reiterate, it is a holistic plan that doesn't just involve rapid transit. It also involves doubling the local bus service and adding some of these express routes. And so it would be an overall improvement to all of the transit operations in central Indiana. So at that, I would like to see if anyone has any questions or comments. Yes.
Can you tell us about the Orange Line?
The Orange Line, yes, I suppose I did gloss over that, but we have not started studying it yet. So I don't have anything to tell you about it just yet because we haven't actually started that one. We did the Red and the Blue Line studies last year. We just started the Purple Line this year. So we'll be doing the Orange Line later on down the road as one of our next projects that we pick up. Yes.
Specifically for the Green Line, around the areas where will be parking available around all the stations.
So he asked if there would be parking on the Green Line around different stations, and that is something that we're looking into, is where would those park and ride locations be located? Where would we build those facilities for people to be able to drive in from further north or from east and west and be able to use that line to access downtown? And so there are certain stations that would be more likely to be park and ride stations than others. And those are all things that we're going to be working into our transit-oriented development strategic plan. So there's going to be a section of that plan that talks specifically about what type of station should be developed at each location. And so that's going to be sort of the size of the station based on the context of the area that it's in, or is it a prime location for park and ride? So there will be some on the Green Line, but there also may be a couple on the Red Line or the Blue Line or the Purple Line, depending on location. And those will all be recommended in that TOD strategic plan.
What sort of roles would the trails and greenways play in the plan? So, for example, getting off at one stop and having access to a trail where you then walk to developments or stores, was that factored into?
Yeah, so the question was, do trails and greenways factor into how we're doing our planning processes? And yes, they do. that is something that we have been looking at as we've gone through to determine where station locations should be and things like that. We want to make sure that the connectivity, not just between transit routes, but that trip after you exit one of those vehicles is something that we look at holistically. So we want to make sure that you have sidewalks, that you can get to where you need to go once you get off of the vehicle, and the trails factor in because it's likely that the vehicles will have some sort of facility for bike racks or something like that, so you could have a multimodal trip. You could either walk or you could use a bike for part of your trip, and then you could access the transit vehicle to get you the rest of the way or part of the way. And so we want to make sure that it's a whole system that we're putting together.
Are there any plans to use applications to track buses over time?
Yes, that is something that Indigo is actually looking into right now. I'm not sure about the tracking in real time, but they're definitely putting GPS trackers on every bus, and hopefully soon, and I'm thinking, I don't want to put a number on it because I think it's soon, but I'm not sure exactly how soon, but they are going to roll out this real-time information. So you'll be able to get online or send a text, or there will be signs at certain, like electronic display signs at certain stops that will tell you how long it's going to be until the next bus gets there. So that's the kind of stuff that Indigo's already working on and putting the technology together so that they can put that in place very soon. All right, well, I think I'll wrap it up here, and do you want to say anything else? Oh. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it, and let me know if you have any other questions.